What's up YouTube? So today we are looking at Ableton Live for the first time on my channel. So this is not actually the first time that I'm using Ableton Live, but it's the first time that I'm looking at it for quite a while. So the last time I used it, I believe, was around version 9. So I'm a little bit behind in terms of what the new features are. And so this is pretty much a noob approach to Ableton. That being said, I have been using other DAWs for the past sort of 10 years or so, so I'm going to be making a few comparisons to other DAWs. That being said, I just kind of want to look at some of the beginner details of what you can expect if you're diving into Ableton Live for the first time. Also, I just want to say full disclosure that Ableton did actually send me Ableton Live Suite for the purpose of this video and others in the future, but it coincides with a campaign that they're running where they're giving away a bunch of Ableton Live 11 Lite licenses. So they've actually given me 100 to give away to you folks. If you're wanting to get into Ableton, you can check out any details about that in the description and the first pinned comment. Also note that this is not a sponsored video. They haven't actually paid me to alter my opinion or anything like that. They essentially just sent me a non-refundable and non-transferable license, which is basically valued at nothing. But for myself, I get to explore new software, I get to show you guys, I get to make tutorials with the software, so it's pretty much a win-win situation. But that being said, I just had to get the full disclosure out of the way first. So anyway, let's dive in and have a look. Okay, so firstly, I want to talk about some of the workflow and setup features in Ableton Live. So one of the things that we're probably going to want to do straight off the bat, if we use a lot of third-party plugins, what we're going to want to do is just jump into our plugins directory over here. Once we've, of course, scanned it in the settings and everything like that, we want to go ahead and assign some of our favorite plugins to the favorites system in Ableton Live. So how we would do that is, for example, here, Equilibrium is one of my personal favorite EQs. What we could do here is we can right click it and say favorites. So we could also go ahead and assign several different other types of favorite systems. Like you can see here, you got orange, yellow, green, blue, etc. So here, for example, if there's stuff that we maybe don't use as often, we can also assign those to like a second favorite system, which will now pop up over here. Note that you can also rename these. So for example, here we could say, I'm going to name these mixing. And so here, for example, I've put Paul Stretch in the mixing, which is probably not a good idea. So what I actually want to do is just put Paul Stretch into favorites rather than the mixing. So then here, for example, we can set Equilibrium as like a mixing plugin, and we can remove it from the favorites as well, except I do want this one in the favorites. So here we've got Equilibrium in the mixing favorites. We can also create a new one, which we can call, for example, like creative effects or something like that. So here we can say snap heap, let's add to yellow and favorites, collections. There we go. Rename creative effects. Done. Cool. So we can go ahead and quickly just create a little bank of the effects and the plugins and stuff that we use the most, just so that it's easier to drag and drop them in. While we're working, we don't have to slow down our workflow, when we're in the thick of things. So I'm just going to quickly go ahead here. So we can also add instruments from the Ableton device collection into our favorites as well. For example, we can add operator. We can add audio effects from the collection into our favorites as well. So you're not just limited to third-party plugins, bear in mind. And you can also do it to individual presets as well. So say, for example, like in the beat repeat, there's a specific preset that you use most of the time. What you can do is you can apply that as a favorite as opposed to the beat repeat, so that while you're kind of, cycling through these favorites, you can just drag in that preset as opposed to having to think about the device, if that makes sense. So that's another pretty handy kind of technique or workflow thing. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to add my samples directory. So what we can do is we can go over here add the samples directory. So sometimes you may want to split your directories up into kind of subdirectories. So say, for example, here I often like to have my samples, which is like everything, and then I'll add individual samples as well. So for example, I have like a drums folder of all my own kind of synthesized drums, and then in here I can kind of go through and find individual sounds, and then just drag and drop those into my DAW. Okay, so let's check out Drift, which is Ableton's newish plugin. I want to check out if we can use this to create a Psytrance bass line. So what I want to do is let's just put this down into like a low F. So the basis of a Psytrance bass is a frequency cutoff envelope. So what we want to do is we want to assign something to modulate this very quickly over time. I believe if we go like this, modulation, we can actually assign the envelope 2 to the low pass frequency, and we can set the amount like this, and then this becomes the envelope for this. So we're probably going to want to turn this drift down. This basically variates the voicing, I believe, kind of makes it sound more analog. But we want a kind of cleaner response, I guess, from the phase of the synth. So drift isn't quite working for me for the bass. I feel like it's kind of trying to model more analog behavior, which is not necessarily what we want. We want something that's going to be a little bit more accurate in terms of the envelope response. So let's go ahead and add in an operator. Let's try out a saw wave. Yes, this is much better. So one thing I want to note is one of the major differences, I guess, between Ableton and Bitwig is that with Bitwig, you can, I mean, there are multi-band compression and all that kind of stuff, but it's not as easy to just kind of drag and drop. So for example, in Ableton, we have dynamics, and then we have the multi-band dynamics system, which is essentially, you know, where OTT kind of comes from. But this is already pre-built multi-band compressor, multi-band expander. In Bitwig, you can do the same, but you have to build it with the multi-effects system and a stack of compressors and that kind of thing. So you're able to get the same tools, but one thing that I appreciate about Ableton is it kind of just gives you a lot of tools that you're most likely going to need the most. It maybe doesn't have the ability to kind of go as deep and to go as finicky and in terms of the fine details, but it definitely has very capable tools. So in terms of the bass sound, I generally like to use a multi-band system just to create a bit of phase rotation. I generally don't dial in many settings here. What I'll generally do is actually just duplicate it again. So we have basically 6 splits, 6 multi-band splits going on. We can even dial in the frequency range of the splits by just changing these frequencies on one or the other. Do you see how it kind of livens up the sound a little bit? That's basically how to build your own disperser. It'd be cool if you could just like drag a sample into an empty space here and it would automatically add the sampler track. That's something that you can do in Bitwig, which is really, really cool. Okay, I'm just going to quickly throw in some sounds from my latest preset pack for Phase Plant. I just want some utility stuff like a downlifter, an uplifter, that kind of stuff. So what I want to do here is just put in a long note here. Boom, like this. And now what we can do is we can actually make this clip longer, like this, but it's actually easier to do it this way. These should actually be 16 bars long, not 15. That was a bit arbitrary. Okay, and then here let's put in a riser. So we got like 2 downlifters and a riser. Just like that. I'm going to quickly just choose one, no matter whether it fits into the context or not. Okay, so one of the things that I've been dying to take a look at inside Ableton is a thing called Corpus, which I believe is a physical modeling resonator. So this is one of the examples of where I say Ableton really shines, in that it kind of mostly sounds good. In every example that I've ever heard it sounds good. Whereas in Bitwig, you have a resonator, similar kind of tool that you can use, but it takes a lot of setup to get such cool sounds out of it. So what I want to do is I want to create a bit of a kind of percussion line using some djembe sounds from this library, the UVI World Suite. So using this, we can actually get this to kind of resonate in key to our track. So what I want to do is I actually want to see if we can we punch in the exact note here? No. Can we, how do you punch in the exact note? I want an exact number. I guess we have to just tune this down to the F and then fine tune it. Oh, we can click on the value here. Still not exact. Weird. Can't get exactly on the F. That is very cool. So let's try put some delay on here. So let's just go with the echo. Okay, what I want to do is I want to split this up into further parts. So I want to have the notes, and then we're going to like sparse them out a little bit. So we're going to have like a few hits, and we're going to move the rest along. So we can kind of create almost like a lead sound out of this. Let's put a filter in between, and let's perhaps set this to a high pass or band pass. Let's see what works best. Awesome. So that's like almost like a synth kind of sound. What we can do is we can also have a quick look at Drift, which is Ableton's latest new synth addition to the their lineup of instruments. So let's add these. I'm going to call this a synth group because I mean that sounds like a synth, even though it's made up from drums. Call this synths. So let's use Drift. So quickly, straight off the bat, I generally end up using an echo or delay on my synth sounds and a bit of reverb as well. So what we could do is we could use some reverb and where's the echo now? And echo again. I want to set this to ping pong. I also want to use a MIDI effect just before the drift. I want to use the pitch. Because what I do here is I only know how to play in C minor, but the track is in F. So if I set this to +5, I can play on my keyboard in C minor, but it's going to match the track's tempo. It's going to match the track's scale. Okay, so with these kinds of synths, I don't really want too much voicing happening, so I'm going to turn down the second oscillator and just use this first oscillator over here. And we can maybe shape it a bit with this parameter over here, which I believe adds a sync effect to the sawtooth. So then when I've done that, I usually like to detune it a bit, a couple of octaves, because it gives it a much fatter sound. So with these kinds of main leads, I like to use a mono glide legato, because then it's going to slide between the notes if you're holding them down. We can set this up a little bit. In fact, now that we've put the sync on, it sounds like there's a bit of low end that's kind of missing here. So I want to add another saw, set that to octave -3, just fade it in a little bit. So we have a bit of a better low end going on here. Okay, so let's look at the filter. It seems like we only have a low pass and a high pass, and then the ability to switch between two different styles. We don't have a band pass filter in this synth. However, we can actually create a band pass by using the frequency of the low pass and the high pass, in parallel mode. So essentially what that means is like you kind of tune them very similarly together, and then you modulate them with the same modulation pattern. So for example, here we could set this LFO to modulate both of these. Okay, that's so weird. It seems like this modulation only applies to one of them. Can we set this? Huh? The high pass doesn't get modulated. What the f is going on here? LFO, high pass. Okay, we gotta assign it, we gotta assign it manually like this. Okay, that's weird, but it works. Yeah, that's sounding good. Here, I want to set this to some kind of randomish pattern. Let's see, how does Wonder sound? I want to add this second envelope to modulate the high pass frequency as well. So then here we've basically got setting this to cycle mode. So it's essentially another LFO. So we've got one doing the random modulation of these parameters, and then another one doing a kind of cycled modulation. And then it's just about kind of tuning the amounts. Okay, let's try a bit of saturation. Awesome. That about sums it up for our first look at Ableton Live 11. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. So I probably won't be switching because I kind of prefer the finicky details, but that being said is I really do like Ableton. I think that there are some really powerful tools here. It's really quick and easy to get going. And yeah, so like I said, I don't think I'll be switching from Bitwig because I kind of do like the whole modular system and the finer details of things. But I really like the fact that now I can kind of do, more tutorials on both sides of things. Because I know that there are a large amount of you folks that are in Ableton. Let me know what you think in the comments. And yeah, don't forget, if you are wanting to get into Ableton, then there are some licenses for me to give away. The links are in the description and the first pinned comment. Big thanks to Ableton for doing this, sending me this copy of Ableton Live 11 Suite to check out, and also for supplying a bunch of the licenses for Ableton Live 11 Lite for you folks. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. As always, if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to my channel and hitting that like button. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.